Greetings, traveler. Have you noticed how some games make you feel immediately amazing when you play them? You get so much reward, you get so many positive feelings from them that you just want to keep playing them for as long as possible. Or have you felt how some activities in life just feel so rewarding that you just don't want to stop doing them? Watching cool movies, doing sports, having fun with a group of friends. These things are things that somehow keeps us getting back to them, and by contrast, there are so many other things in life where we try it for a few seconds or a few minutes, and we don't see any point in continuing with them at all. Today, I want to talk about what I call the golden ratio of enjoyment and how I have found it to be extremely powerful when designing any activity or any feature for a game that I've worked on. My name is Kanthos. I've been working in the games industry for over 13 years now, and I've been putting together my own group activities and my own D&D campaigns and adventure for much longer than that. And I noticed that basically you have this situation where you try something yourself, or you have some people try something that you made, and there's just no engagement there. It doesn't seem fun. People are not having a good time. Most crucially, the KPI that you can use to measure this is, do people keep on doing it? It's a very simple thing. Or if it's a published game, do people keep on buying it? Do people keep on clearing objectives in the game? Do they spend more time? So I was troubled by this situation immensely. I would see so many games out there, including games that I had made myself, just get very, very little engagement in the beginning. So I had to make sense of what makes people engage with content more, or play games more, or do these activities more, and what is not going well in this situation that's making people stop doing them. So I did a lot of research. I went back all the way to the roots of human civilization, or even before humans were a species, and also looked at other species as well. If you take a look at how animals and how early humans just lived life, you see this ratio being there right from the beginning. What do I mean by that? Let's say you have a tiger in the forest, and the tiger is just chilling there, and eventually the tiger feels so much hunger that it is compelled to go out and hunt something. So uh, hunting itself is 99% of walking around, very low energy activity until you find your prey. And then when you do find your prey, it's a few short, high intensity moments that will get you your dinner, essentially, if you're a tiger. So getting to the prey takes a lot of time. It's not a very difficult thing to do. It's not a very strenuous activity. It's just walking around looking for the animal to catch. Once you find the animal, it's a few short moments of high burst activity. So these short moments will in turn give the satisfaction of the meal for most creatures. So a few short moments of hunting and you catch your meal. And for most animals, when they catch their prey, or when they find the fruit they want to eat, or whatever they consume, then comes the enjoyment of just relaxing, taking the food to a safe location, settling down and enjoying it as much as possible. And since this activity repeats over and over and over again in a creature's lifetime, eventually the surrounding activities of the feeding become fun as well, because every creature learns its importance. So over time, most predators out in the wild will start hunting before they are hungry, because they know about the enjoyment of the meal. They start enjoying the hunts. Many animals hunt for sport even. So clearly there is a mechanism there, a biological mechanism, if I can call it that, that dictates that some activities are so highly worth it that you just feel so compelled to follow them. So this is all good for tigers and so on, but what does it mean for us as game designers? Well, imagine a situation where you design a new game mechanic and you say, look, this is your character's power level at this point. This is a new technique the character can use, but it requires a certain type of button presses. and it's going to give you more power than what you had before. So your normal attack with one button press is, let's say, 100, but your attack with 3 button presses is 500. So lots of gain there. But it's more effort since you have to memorize it and you have to execute it. Looking at this and looking at the engagement of players in this kind of scenario, usually in the industry, we talk about 2 types of rewards, right? One is the intrinsic reward. And by intrinsic reward, I mean the enjoyment you get and the rewards you get from the activity itself. So since we're going with this button press example, get the timing right with your button presses, or look at the character's model, execute this very acrobatic kick or whatever that this new technique involves, or the sounds or the feeling of the impact on the enemy. All these things are intrinsic. You enjoy those things, so you want to do this activity as much as possible because it just feels so good to execute. This is all part of the intrinsic reward. The extrinsic reward is enjoyment or rewards in the game you get after you have completed the activity as a result of it. So that's the XP you get after you defeat the enemy with this new attack, or the enjoyment you get of having mastered it, or the feeling you get that, since you learned a technique and it made you stronger, perhaps learning more techniques like this in the future will make you even more strong and will lead even to more enjoyment. Or after you performed this technique 10 times, there was this new extra skill that you unlocked that also gives you more enjoyment. Those are extrinsic activities, extrinsic rewards that you get after you complete the activity, usually with some time delay. So how do we get to this 10-to-1 ratio? How do we make sure that the effort that we put in for this activity is the 1 part of the ratio and the reward we get is the 10? And if you've ever done anything in an economic setting, so if you've studied economics before or are very close to the game sales part of this, you might have witnessed this phenomenon in other academic fields. So for example, if you have a game that costs, let's say, $10, based on most people's feeling of the game, and you sell this game for $10, then there's very, very few people who would be interested in it. Now, if you sell the same game for $1, knowing that people would normally value this at 10, then lots of people are interested in buying it because they feel that they get a reward of 10 for an effort of $1. So this is an extremely powerful ratio. This can be used in so many different areas in life, but let's just focus on games. So this very much happens in games, and it's very much a part of all the things we design in games. And this is the golden ratio that we want to shoot for. So the sum of all the intrinsic rewards and all the extrinsic rewards needs to come up to roughly 10. So then the next problem appears. How do we know this is 10, and how can we measure it, and how can we make sure it works for everyone? Short answer, we cannot make sure it works for everyone because everyone is different, and that's why we have so many different types of games and so many types of activities within games, or so many types of weapons and classes and so on. So within the same game, you might have the wizard, the fighter, and the thief, and they all generally achieve the same thing. They all defeat enemies, but they do it in a different way that highlights a different type of enjoyment for different types of players. And of course, there's a lot of people out there who would not enjoy this game altogether, so they play other types of games that give them the enjoyment that they like. So thinking that you can enjoy something in such a way that's design a game rather in such a way that it would please everyone might be too ambitious, but it has been done before, so maybe it's not entirely impossible. So looking at the target audience for a specific game you have in mind, and making sure that since you specified the target audience, so it's people who enjoy, for example, fantasy combat, then you've already established the core audience, right? We know something about them. We know whom we're trying to delight with our content. So that helps us to put the activities in the game that would delight this particular audience. So since this is a example about a fantasy combat game, then already you have two elements to work with, fantasy and combat. Hence the wizard, thief, and so on example for now. So that already sets us on a good path, and it gives us a general way to balance the extrinsic and the intrinsic rewards for providing the value that we want. So intrinsically, intrinsically in this example, if we're trying to provide enough reward as a wizard to cast the spells to defeat enemies, then providing some sort of mastery over this in the type of activity that the wizard has to do to cast their spells will help us immensely. So if the fighter presses one button to attack and the wizard presses the same button to attack, then we don't have so much differentiation between the two. But if, for example, the fighter does the attack with one button, one sword swing, and the wizard has nothing equivalent, but the wizard has to do 3 button presses to cast a spell that's more than 3 times powerful, then that already feels different, and it already feels closer to the wizard experience versus the fighter experience. Of course, this is just an example. There's many ways to actualize this. For the extrinsic reward here, this is a bit more uniform. It can be XP or money or all the things we use in games, typically to increase the enjoyment. And typically, extrinsic rewards tend to be not as powerful, in my opinion, in my experience, because they're a bit more distant from the activity itself. So there is thankfully some research to back this up. So when dog trainers are trying to associate an activity with a positive reinforcement, then they found out that the timing is actually super important. So for example, you want to say sit and the dog sits down, and if it does it, then you give the dog a treat. So if the treat is given immediately when the dog follows the command, then that sort of training seems to work, fairly well. If giving the treat is delayed by a few seconds, then this is still effective, but not as effective as when the treat was given immediately. And finally, if you say sit and the dog sits down and you delay the reward for, I think, what was it, like 5 or 10 minutes or more, then the dog just cannot make the association anymore. It doesn't know what it got the treat for. Even though humans have a longer memory span and we can associate things better, dogs apparently, the 5 or 10 minutes or so is too much for them and they cannot make the association anymore. So this effect is still somewhat present in people. If the feedback and the reward for the activity is just too far detached from it, it's not that humans cannot perceive it, but it's not as easily and as positively perceived as the immediate reward. So the reward intrinsically for mastering the technique or for seeing the high damage. And you have to typically do a lot more work to make an extrinsic reward feel anywhere close to that. So it would have to be a crazy amount of money or a really high amount of XP to achieve something similar. So that is how you can manufacture a general framework around providing this very, very high reward for a seemingly very low effort to achieve the reward. And this is something people, you could say biologically, are trained to follow. They're trained to enjoy and love and keep pursuing. And in case you want to apply this to a more generalized setting, or if you think that, well, I'm not sure if the mechanic I have in mind is good for my target audience, and I just don't know if I can apply it to everyone. And perhaps you're not working with games, perhaps you're working with education or with getting people to just follow along in a certain activity. Here's one tool that can definitely help even in those situations. And of course, it can be super helpful in games to get people engaged as well. So one of the things people enjoy that we know from the self-determination theory from psychology is mastery, right? Doing something they feel is relevant to their lives better. So when you feel something you did well, that somehow intrinsically, biologically gives people a very, very positive feeling, a very good reward psychologically. So how can we manufacture this in a game? This is probably what almost everyone has experienced in games as tutorials. So when a game starts, the first commands that you have to follow are typically extremely simple, like press W to move forward, move the stick right to turn right. It's very, very simple things like that. Now, these are a bit too simple since they require almost no effort to achieve, but the section immediately after that, where the game teaches you the base mechanics of the game, so how to perform the attacks, how to cast the spells, if it's a driving game, how to start taking racing lines around a racetrack, or if it's a soccer game, for example, how to maneuver the ball in such a way that you can get around the enemy team players and so on. These are a bit more um, difficult tasks. These start requiring an effort of about one in this case, but they are set in such a way by the game to give you a disproportionately high reward based on what you did. So in those cases, the enemies or the obstacles you have to overcome in these early tutorials are very, very easy on purpose. So the game designers there have specifically manufactured the experience to give you a reward of 10 when you put an effort of 1. So you do it, you get this great reward. Of course, the enemies are just playing along in this case, but it's on purpose to give you a high reward to get you to perform the technique or the ability the right way the first times. And then when you have mastered that, since it's purposely set to be very, very easy, then you can go ahead and perform it in a more difficult setting. And this is the other side of this rule, of this method. So the 10-to-1 ratio, at least from what I found in my experience working in the games industry, is super important. What does that mean? You cannot skew it the other way too much either. So if you get a reward of 10 for an effort of 0.1, then things start to break down a little bit. Then you get the experience of, let's say, a God mode in a game, where you just fly around, you're all powerful, you cannot be killed, you can kill everything in one hit, you're completely invulnerable. So here you have a massive reward for basically no effort. Now, humans also experience this in life as well. So if someone came to you and gave you infinite money, infinite food, I don't know, infinite, whatever you want to call it, toys or whatever, then the experience of life slowly begins to break down. You think, well, I have everything. Why should I put any effort in anything? I don't feel the need to pursue anything. So that is exactly what happens in a game if you feel that you are too powerful, or very early in the beginning, you get a weapon that just kills everything in one shot. You feel that golden 10-to-1 ratio is not 10-to-1 anymore. And it's maybe 100-to-1 or 10,000-to-1. So that is very difficult to relate to humans. And that's why sometimes we get this very weird feeling of enjoyment that we had in the beginning when the game was a bit more challenging. But now that we're strong, the game is not interesting anymore. So um, anyway, these are my thoughts on this golden enjoyment rule and how you can use it inside video games and outside to get players to engage more and to understand what sort of bracket, what sort of golden engagement level most people have to be in to feel this enjoyment and to feel like if they put a little bit of time or a little bit of effort in the game, they will get lots more in return. And that's why it makes sense to do it. Just like it makes sense to eat food every day, just like it makes sense to, I don't know, meet with friends. We do have to put a little bit of work into it, but we get a way higher reward, and that feels awesome. Anyway, thank you so much for your time. And as always, have fun.